I'm Dan Manson, NCL Commissioner, and it's my pleasure to have with us presenting Caitlin Bestenheider, the NCL Chief Player Ambassador, and Stephen Miller, the NCL Chief Coach Ambassador. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Stephen, for being on the call. And today's topic is putting the pre into NCL, which means what do you do before the actual game starts? And there is a lot you can do. The registration is finishing now. The gym is about to open. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Stephen to talk about what's next. After they register, and as soon as the gym opens, what can they be doing?
So I actually use P.R.E. as an abbreviation as well. So I call practicing real engagement, and it's kind of my philosophy on coaching the NCL. One of my workshop co-hosts, Vicente, is here with me. Hopefully some others will be stopping by. I think we are on a snacks run right now because we've been fervently working from our hotel room since we landed last night. But for me, practicing real engagement means not necessarily coaching your students by giving them the steps to solve particular challenges, but instead teaching them how to think about challenges that they don't know the answer to. So if they run into an unknown file extension, don't necessarily just say like, oh, go use this utility. Tell them, well, what do you do when you don't know what to do with an unknown file extension? You know, you look it up. And then what do you do once you find a tool? And teach them how to teach themselves more than teach them how to do specific skills. And that's actually what our NoobSec workshop is about.
Great. Stephen, what are your thoughts about practicing once that gym opens?
Well, one of the things that our students, we tell them they should be practicing all the time, but we actually, kind of what Caitlin said, we actually have our students in the areas that they're having problems to, we'll try to open up the labs and different challenges that we know we can go to from past puzzles and have them work on those. And also do some research if they need to do some research through Google to see an area they may be deficient in. So it's kind of the same type of thing. But we also, a lot of the students, we don't, it's not like we're grading them or anything like that. So a lot of them are on their own. And our students are probably, most of them are working and during the day. And so they have to kind of schedule their time in the evening to do things. So we're not always around to help them other than through emails or text.
So that's a great point, because the flexibility of NCL enables anyone to play. And if you do a full-time job in some other competitions, that might keep you from participating, but it's not the case with National Cyber League. So how do you tell someone who has a full-time job that it's okay to still participate in this competition, Stephen?
Well, I think our students have it, since all of our courses are online, they're pretty much self, you might say, and so they know what they have to do, and we make the announcements through our Black system for them to join the National Cyber League every semester, and tell them and demonstrate to them through other students. That's the word of mouth seems to really help at our school. So through the chats that we have in Blackboard, the other students will talk about their experiences in the NCL and help recruit
Thank you. Kate, I know that you work with a variety of students. You work with college students, you work with high school students, but I'm sure that you get students once in a while that say, you know, I would like to play NCL, but I can't put in the time. I don't have 10 hours a week to practice. So what do you tell the students that say, well, I don't have enough time to prepare to play?
You know what? I'm actually training Vicente to coach the NCL team at Pace University like next year. So let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, so I started competing in NCL last semester, and it was very open, and I loved the competition from the start. And I feel like because of Cyber Skyline and the online environment, it's really easy to even work from home on your free time. You may not necessarily have time to come to the team meetings, but if you have a laptop and you have internet access, you can easily work from home.
Great. And when you're getting ready to practice, to play in the competition, what are your goals? What are your practice goals? Or now that you're coaching, what do you tell the students are the goals for the practice? Is it to simulate the competition? Is it to gain a comfort level with the process of solving a challenge? What are the practice objectives?
So from the start, I feel like students have to figure out what they're not good at so we could determine where we go from there. If we figure out what they're not good at, then we could focus the practices on improving their skill set in that area. I feel like open source cryptography and password cracking for me were the easiest, and I felt like I needed more time to work on network trafficking and yeah, like network trafficking, enumeration, and things like that.
I definitely find that as a coach, a lot of my students who spend a lot of time with me, like Vicente, tend to have the same like expertise as me. So I feel like as a coach, it's also important to kind of like check yourself and see where you're at. Like I struggle in network traffic, and I'm noticing that's becoming a really common theme with the people I'm coaching. Even though like I don't teach people the process, I teach them how to think about solving challenges on their own. My lack of confidence, I think, kind of like bleeds over. And I think that's something that as a coach, you also need to kind of check so that if you're not comfortable in something, build your skill set so that you can, help the students who are struggling, because it might be a really hard section. It might just be that network traffic is hard, or it might just be that you haven't found the lens that works for your group yet.
Yeah, I would say
as a coach, go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to say, a good example too is having the other students that are strong in one area work with the other students, so they you learn better when you're teaching. So I kind of let the other students teach in their area that they're strong in, teach those ones that are not so strong in that particular area, like for example encryption or something.
That's why I started having Vicente, like, honestly, I'm getting a little lazy in practice. I've started being like, Vicente, can you help this person with this? And I just kind of delegate him out a lot. If somebody's really struggling, I'll like step in because sometimes just a different perspective or a different wording is helpful. But I've really like just seen, and a lot of the students, because I have the title of official coach, like it's more intimidating to work with me, whereas working with Vicente, who's technically another student, like they're more into it, and it's more like cool to peer teach than it is to just like work with a coach, if that makes any sense.
Do you find sometimes that as a coach, sometimes they view you as a teacher and they don't want to, admit what they don't know, whereas with a peer, with a fellow player, they're more willing to, share their doubts and their struggles or something like that?
Absolutely. And that's why it's been such an advantage to have the people who are working on my workshop in practice. Two of them who are coming back hopefully soon, Lizzie Malloy and Gina Kazenza, they both help as well. So it helps to give them leadership opportunities. I've seen a really big difference in Vicente, especially taking on a lot of leadership roles. But it also like makes it easier for them to really drill into what the person doesn't understand, instead of like, oh, I don't understand this challenge as a whole. And when somebody with the role of like coach or teacher tries to drill in on those things, students become a little bit defensive and they don't want to admit what they do and don't know. But whereas if you're working with a student, you can really fine tune and break down the parts of what you know versus what you don't know, and how to like kind of correct that and re-navigate to solve the challenge.
Kate made a good point about a couple of students coming back. I think you mentioned that. And we have one student that excelled back in 2014, and he works, he's working now, and he's working on his bachelor's, but he does come back and works with our students, which is, they really look up to someone like him, because he did so well his first time. He was like ranked 96 or something like that. So he's an awesome role model for the students.
And I've done that with Westchester Community College, especially when they're recruiting for NCL. I like to go and talk about like my experience, and seeing someone that came from the position you're in succeed makes it a lot more like achievable and attainable. That's a really big thing we're talking about in like women in tech conferences and people in minorities in tech, whatever that might be. It's really important to see someone that you identify with in the role you want to achieve for you to really like truly believe that you can achieve it. And while there's anomalies and people who are like really self-confident and think they can do it without that, for kind of like the general like tribe mentality that humans have, we need to see it to know that we can achieve it.
Great. I want the audience to know we have a pretty good representation out there. Please, if you have any questions, use the chat and we'll respond to your chat messages. And if you raise your hand, we can also have you actually ask your question and put you on audio. But we're really interested in any questions that you have related to preparing for NCL. We do this show for your benefit. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand or post in the chat room.
Also, if you're super shy and you don't want to like be seen in this chat, it's totally cool to reach out to us. I know Dan, Steven, and I are all really accessible and we all really want to help people. So if you contact any of us, we're willing to help you privately with like more specific issues and things like that.
Is there a certain amount of time you want students to practice? Do you have a formal practice time that you look for with your students? And do you also have informal practice? Do you say, well, in addition to this scheduled time, I want you to try and find some time on your own?
For me, I hold, at PACE at least, I hold open lab hours. I hold 2-hour sessions every week that students can come and go as they please. What I've noticed is the students like Vicente who show up every single week excel really well. Last season, Vicente came in 4th at PACE. The other 2 girls in my workshop were the only people who beat him besides me. So you can see the growth. Like the people that I picked for my workshop were the people who were at practice all the time and really engaged in practice and believed in the process. And if you trust that learning the methodologies behind how to solve a challenge, how to think about solving a challenge you don't understand, rather than how to solve the challenge, you're going to go really, really far and you're going to do really, really well. But if you don't show up that much and you come and go, like you're definitely going to see a decline in your score. So I kind of leave that up to the students. Like if you want to do really well and this is important to you, you'll show up a lot. And if it's not that important to you, you won't show up that much and you'll see a difference. And it's not that you can't do it, it's that you elected not to show up. But with my high school kids, I hold for a while, like every Friday we worked on NCL and we would do practice challenges and things like that. So it really depends on the demographic that you're working with.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
Very good.
I don't actually coach the high schools because the science teacher coaches the high schools, but I know that I have a conference call with them every Monday, and I know they're working on the labs right now which is part of their curriculum they have for that class. So we do have, if you're in a class that requires NCL, then there's certain labs that you have to complete along with the puzzles in order to get credit for those particular ones. But for the other students that are just non-credited participants in the NCL, and we offer the NCL to anyone in the school that would like to participate. We try to tell them you don't have to be in IT, you don't have to be in cyber. Anyone can participate in the NCL. So those students, from the coach's perspective, they could come into our online chat board and try to get help.
I have one of my other workshop people here. Her name is Gina. She's a junior at PACE. Last season she was in practice a lot. This season not so much. So maybe she can talk about the same thing. Hold on. Come here. everybody's like chilling in the corner trying not to be on camera. So Gina, the question was like, how many hours do you think you need to practice for NCL? Do you think it needs to be like a set schedule, or do you think it varies? Like,
I definitely think it varies depending on like,
you got to talk into.
I definitely think it varies on how much you know and like how much like retain. So like for me, if I'm like looking at it a couple hours a week, I'm fine, but other people might need some more. So
they're all.
Thank you. We have
I can also
we have a question from the audience from Ender Rodriguez. Do the coaches' account have the same access to the gym as the competitors? Can coaches participate in past challenges as a user?
I think the only difference is that the coaches are pulled from the final scouting reports, is my understanding.
That's correct. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, but we have access. Yeah, you have access as a coach. And,
I use my coaching account to tease my students. So I will only score like a few points more than them. Like I'll watch their scores, and whoever's in first place, I'll let them beat me for a little bit, and then I'll beat them. And like it causes them to like panic and make their scores like higher because they're like, oh, we could beat her. And then like I just blow them away by like 1,000 points at the end, which is really fun.
So this is a question for coaches as well, because you mentioned for your players, the amount of time they put into practice relates to how well they do in the competition. But as a coach, do you feel that your ability as a coach relates to how much time you put in terms of getting up to speed using your account?
I actually think I put more time into engaging with my computers. The people that like I now consider among like my friends. Especially at Pace, like not so much at the high school, but at Pace where like they're my peers, the people who are at practice consistently, like we built this like friendship. So like during the competition, I could like text them and check on them. And I know it's sort of different because of my age and being, the same age as my students. But I put way more effort into the engagement and like, I don't know what the word is, to like get to know and like keep my team.
So a question as a coach, and if you can bring your players on, I'd like them to chime in on this.
So we have Vicente, he's a freshman at Pace. We have Lizzie Malloy, who's a senior at Pace and my work life, and Gina Cosenza, who is a junior at Pace.
So the three of you, when you're going to practice, you have your own goals in terms of what you want to achieve in practice, but how does that relate to the coach? What is it that you look for from a coach as you're practicing? Is the coach a facilitator for you? Is the coach, sometimes you want them to be a teacher for you, but what is it in terms of preparation do you look for from a coach?
I think for me, it's more of a motivator. Someone to keep me going even when I hit a bump in the road, to tell me, all right, even if you're stuck in this little problem right here, just, you know what, step aside for a bit, take a breather, probably take a look at another challenge, and you'll get it. You'll definitely get it. It's just right now your brain's in overdrive, so it's time to like step away, but I know you could do it. So for me, it was more of just the motivation and perseverance.
Lizzie also has a great example of how you can help as a coach from last season when your computer blue screened.
Oh yeah, no thank you.
2 hours into the competition, Lizzie's computer blue screened.
Yeah.
So I immediately was like, Lizzie, come over to my house. I'll give you a PC. So she at least had a workstation to work from.
That was like my worst nightmare.
But like in that emergency situation, when like the worst case scenario is happening, like having the solutions for them is great.
So one of the goals at NCL is to have it be more something that you do as fun rather than worrying about, your grade or stressing in a traditional way. There's stress, but I call it good stress. So when you're struggling, the coach is there to say it's okay to struggle. It's okay to not get the answer. It's okay to not know what you're doing. Eventually you can get to the point where you do know what you're doing and know how to solve. Is that something you look for from Kate?
Oh yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah. No doubt about that.
Especially when I know how close they are to the answer.
You're like, you're almost there.
I'm like, no,
I get so frustrated.
Do you find eventually that you enjoy the struggling as well as succeeding, that part of the fun of NCL is going through that. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that, to get to the point where you actually solve.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the more you struggle, at the end, once you get the answer, you'll feel like, wow, I actually did this.
That's satisfaction.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
doing it on your own is just because it proves that, like, no matter what challenge you get, even in the workforce, you know that you could troubleshoot it into any, and you can just you can do it. You don't have to like panic and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know the answer. What am I supposed to do? So for me, that's just.
One of the things we tried this semester in our capstone class is we're using a nice challenge, which is not totally related to the NCL puzzles, or capture the flags, but it's a very real-like environment in a help desk environment, and it helps the students really think about what they have to do to solve a problem and the different techniques and ways to go about solving that problem. And the feedback I've had so far from the students is that they want more of that type of experience. They think it'll help them. So we'll see if it really does help in the competition for NCL. But they've been really excited about that new tool that we're using to help prep students.
That's great. It's a nice.
While we have
Go ahead.
coaches here, I know for the coaches, sometimes it's hard to understand like the student perspective on things. So I wanted to ask my guys, what do you think, like what feelings and emotions go through your head as you're getting ready for like your first season? Everybody in this room was a first season competitor last season, and now I'm using them on my panel of experts. So that shows you how much you can grow in one season. So what kind of things did you feel going into your first season? Like before preseason started, this is, the gym's about to open, like I think it's next week. How are you feeling at that point?
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I was like, I need to like get a schedule. I need to like, cause like I was like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I felt like if I jumped into it, I would be like a little bit too over my head.
Lizzie wanted to practice like 60 hours a week for like the entire summer. But I think we had our like 2-hour practices every week for only a couple of weeks. I think we maybe had 10 hours of prep time, and they went in and Gina came in second at pace, Lizzie came in third, and Vicente came in fourth. You cried?
So what is your advice? So for the three of you, what is your advice to a student, whether they're, a high school student, a college student, and, someone going through career transition and trying to understand cybersecurity from scratch? What is your advice in terms of playing in a competition, versus the traditional way that you go to class? Do you encourage both? Do you encourage the competition as something that is going to open their eyes more? And how do you get them to get past that point of saying, I need 60 hours of practice before I can do something? What do you tell someone brand new?
I think for me, it was definitely like, don't freak out about the stuff you don't know. Because I went in last semester not knowing anything. Like, I'm a computer science major. I'd only been a computer science major for like a year because I switched majors after my first year. And I still feel like I know nothing about cybersecurity, but it was kind of like I went into it like from scratch, not knowing anything, and then freaked out during the competition. I was like, I don't know this stuff. But then like at the end, I was like, I knew a lot more than I thought I knew. I think that kind of speaks to Kate as a coach, because like I didn't really know that much.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like the best way to practice is by actually doing. Like when I first started, I felt like, oh, I'm gonna go back to my dorm, I'm gonna buy some online courses, and I'm gonna master all of this in one night, then come to the competition and blow everybody away. But that's not really the way to do it. You have to actually dive right in, start practicing, and I feel like Kate really helped out with that.
Yeah, and also that there's like I knew there was like a stigma, especially for me in high school, that like asking your teacher a stupid question, and especially with this, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Like, and there's like You can ask as many questions as you need. Like, I know your whole story was you didn't know what Control-Alt-Delete was. And
Yeah,
so
like,
it's like
guys, I was so dumb my first season. Like, I couldn't even turn on my
but
computer.
it's just like breaking down that barrier of like there's not like you're not already supposed to know something. Like even if you don't know anything, that's perfectly fine. You're in an environment where you're surrounded by people who already been there. So I think it's different when you're around that environment and you can feel like, all right, this is a good place to start and this is a good place for me to like get where I want to be. Yeah, that was a time stupid question.
Yeah.
What is the quality you think you need for NCL? This is for the three of you. What is the one or two qualities? Is it just, you know, believing that it's okay to go up this learning curve? It's okay to know nothing. It's okay to be willing to jump into it's like jumping into the deep end without swimming, without having a swimming lesson. Is it something like that? But what are the qualities that you think really are the best ones to have going in?
Yeah, I feel like you definitely have to have like enthusiasm and curiosity, because once I first started, Kate wasn't on me like, oh, are you coming to practice? Like it was my choice to go. She wasn't forcing me to do it, and I wanted to do it. So I feel like if you want to do it and you would put in the work, you're in a perfect position to do well in the competition.
And then once you know people and you know that they're like capable of more, then you can like Snapchat scream at them, where are you, when practice starts and they're not there.
How do you use the Slack channel? I know that, you know, NCL has a very active Slack channel, and do you have your own channels that you use to, you know, before the competition, or how do you use online communication?
No, I didn't know
So
that. No.
I use the Slack. I actually have a lot of friends in there from previous seasons. There's people that I love to see. There's people that get excited. That like the group is so great. The community is so great. So the first time you log on, if you're like somebody that was like active in the chat and they like know you, it's really it's just such an amazing, welcoming community, and like they self-moderate really well. Like I know that Franz and I forget the other person's name. Cyber Skyline doesn't intervene and yell too much.
Toby?
What you should say, not say. There's people in the chat that are like, hey, you can't talk about that yet. Like that question's not okay. Nobody answer him. Things like that. But it's just such a great place to like connect with people all over. I've made friends that I now talk to regularly off Slack, and I've coached virtually for other teams, like a guest coaching session. They've traded secrets with me, like after the competition. I've been like, oh my god, how did you solve this one section? And they've like helped me. So that kind of peer-to-peer learning again is absolutely vital in this competition. Somebody shot me a private message about where to find practice materials. And the best place to start is the NCL Gymnasium. These challenges are actually from previous competitions, so you can see what the competition's really like. Additionally, after my workshop on Thursday, there'll be a ton of resources on my blog. It's actually going to be it's going to be Crypto Kate's coaching guide, an introduction to NCL, and it will have everything that you need as a student or coach trying to start a team for the first time.
You're going to post that link on the NCL website?
Yes, as soon as I make it. I'm writing for the workshop that's tomorrow.
So another question, and especially for the three students, is when you're in Slack, they don't know who you are. They don't know how old you are. They don't know your background, your experience. Do you like Slack, and do you like the virtual nature of the competition because of that? Because, you know, basically you're competing against people across the country. You're communicating with people. You're learning from people across the country. And it can be every age group, because NCL now is played from basically beginning of high school up to however old you are. Is that part of the thing that you like, that, you know, you really have this equal opportunity experience?
I don't think they've used the Slack yet. I'm getting yelled at because apparently they just found out about it.
Yeah.
So my experience as a student in the chat is it was never really like super anonymous, because you actually get to know the people really well, and then you connect on Twitter or Facebook or social media, and you kind of develop this network of friends all over the US, and it's so great because I've because of the Slack chat and NCL and things like that, I've got to guest coach and guest lecture in Iowa, in Michigan, and West Virginia. I'm talking to somebody over in California. And it's just, it's so great to like feel like you can reach so far and have like, no matter where you go, you have friends. Like I'm meeting up, we're in Chicago for the Women in Cybersecurity Conference. And on Saturday night after the conference, I'm meeting up with somebody that I happen to know in Chicago. And it's such a crazy experience to have such a widespread network. So it could be anonymous if you chose it to be that way, but I think it's definitely more fun to make real connections.
Now, NCL is a lot more than a competition. We really want you to prepare for, going into the cybersecurity profession. We have the bodies of knowledge you learn, CEH, Security Plus. We tie this to curriculum. We tie this to learning objectives. So when you're in that channel, do you find yourself not only talking to people about the actual game, but you're talking to people about being a cybersecurity professional and, the bigger picture of why you want to go into cybersecurity and what is the field like? Do you find that to be beneficial as well?
I think I mostly use the chat to like fart around and like be distracted. Because like I only go into the Slack when like I can't function anymore. I'm cranky. I'm stuck on a challenge. I've been stuck on the same challenge for hours and hours. I want to scream. I want to vent a little bit, and I'll be like, "Oh, this challenge is killing me." And I'll scroll through, and I'll see all these other people saying the same thing, and like the camaraderie of like you're not alone. It's okay to not know things. Like it's kind of I use it for like a morale boost when I'm at those like roadblocks that a lot of people who aren't determined would just full stop and quit. And having that like morale boost can help get you through the tough parts.
So having that shared struggle, that shared experience is something Slack really does for you.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I use it for. And then like I make friends, of course, because we're all like kind of complaining about the same things.
Kate, can you talk a little bit about your workshop? I know we're hoping to do it on Facebook Live. We're really hoping to share, the information in the workshop, but can you give us an idea of what your goals are for tomorrow in the WISE's workshop?
Specifically at WISES, my goals, so last year at WISES, I kind of felt like I found my tribe for the first time. I felt like I finally put my feet on the ground in this industry, and I didn't feel lost and isolated and alone. I had like sort of like acquaintances in the industry, but I didn't feel like I had any friends. I didn't feel like I had any people rooting for me that weren't like supposed to root for me. Because of course, like the people in your classes and the people teaching you are supposed to root for you. And at WISES, I met strangers who rooted for you because we have this like, community of women. So I really wanted, when the call for papers came out, I wanted to write something that would be meaningful and impact other students the same way it impacted me. And I took a workshop at the Grace Hopper Women in Computing Celebration about how to write your first workshop. And it was, it kind of taught me that everybody has something that they're really good at and something that they can share with the world. So if you want to share something with the world, it's just about finding what your thing is. And pretty much since my second semester in cybersecurity, I've been a really big advocate for NCL. I've been, a team captain and a coach, and I've dragged as many people kicking and screaming into the competition as humanly possible because I think it's the best first time CTF experience that you could possibly have if you're new to the field. And honestly, like I was dragged kicking and screaming into the competition. So I know like getting over that initial, like, I can't do this is like almost impossible. And I wanted to find a way to help coaches and students get over that initial, I can't do this, because there's no one here that can't do it more than I couldn't do it when I started. And look how far I've come. So the thing I wanted to do most is like introduce NCL, talk about why it's so wonderful and amazing, how accessible it is, how available it is, how great the curriculum is. I wanted to talk about the scouting report and how it's helped me to go for job interviews and things like that. But kind of my unofficial goals are just to like connect with as many people as possible, let them know that they're not alone. If they need advice, things like that, like my Twitter is always open. Like I, against many people's advice, have open DMs on Twitter. Shoot me a message. I'll do anything in my power to help you like get your feet on the ground, because I could not have done it myself. It's from all of my mentors who have helped me. So I can't pay them back. I want to pay it forward. And that's the goals of the workshop, is to pay it forward, all the help that I've gotten to get where I am today.
I think.
Well, the workshop is sold out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephen.
No pressure.
I was going to say this is a example of a real life experience at a workforce, because I've had students come back to me that participated in the past NCLs and now are working at places like State Farm and the multi-factor authentication group, and their feedback is, hey, we learned the teamwork we experienced there helped us when we came to work, because everything's about teamwork and collaboration, and it takes more than one person to solve some of these problems. So I think this is the one thing about the NCL, especially when you're going with the team competition. It's a real good experience that you just can't get in a classroom, even if it's a project type of activity. So I think that's one of the strengths of the NCL.
NCL really does help you to like find your tribe. And we wanted to bring that element into the workshop. So we decided to exclusively make the workshop so you had to work with everybody at your table. You're not allowed to work by yourself in this workshop, because we want you to connect with the other people at your table, because it's the first workshop series at the conference. So we want you to leave. The teams are 6 to 8. So we want you to leave with 6 to 8 friends to hang out with the rest of the weekend.
Very cool. Very cool.
And even those students that are not doing that well to start with, you're learning from that experience, and you're an important part of that team, even if you don't have that much to contribute, because you will contribute later on in the future. So I know I'll go back to my NASA times. Jim Lovell mentioned to me one time, I said, well, I just was in the communication command and telemetry system. So I was just down there in the basement of the on first floor of mission control, and I really didn't do much. He says, what you do is as important as what I do. You're all part of the team.
And if you're the student at the table at the workshop or in NCL practice or anything that doesn't really know anything and everybody's explaining things to you, you're helping them, because when a student teaches someone else, it increases their mastery of a skill. So never feel bad if somebody's explaining it to you, because if they can explain it to you, they are improving their own skill. Even when I teach things, like I use the same challenges every single practice, and I can literally not look at your screen and tell by your question where you're stuck. Like I have these memorized. I know all the answers without looking. Every time I explain it to you, it makes me a better competitor, because I gain a better mastery and understanding of the steps. And if you have questions and you don't understand what they're saying, make them break it down and explain it to you, because you are increasing their skill. And that's the thing a lot of students are afraid to do. I know I was afraid to do it first season. I have a friend, Mike Gabriel, who I drove crazy with questions. Like I would bother him a million times and I'd ask everything in the whole wide world. But I watched his score increase every season, and he doesn't have to say that it was because, he can say it was because of whatever. But I know that helping someone else can definitely increase your skill set. So don't ever feel bad for asking questions.
Is the ability to ask a good question similar to the ability to Google well, that you can learn a lot by knowing how to ask or how to search?
So I get asked questions that range from like questions that I'll never answer you in 1,000 years because it's too specific, to questions that are like, okay, I'm stuck on this very specific thing and I don't know what to do. Like I've searched this, and this, and I don't know how to move forward. And usually it's just changing the like keyword of your search. And like, that's a good question. Telling me that you've exhausted all of your own resources before you ask the question tells me what you don't understand so I can fix it. But if you just ask me like, I don't know how to do this, it's really hard for me to help you grow your skill set because telling you the answer is not going to happen in my practices. That's my PRE. I practice real engagement. I make sure that you engage with the material and learn by yourself. So if you say, I don't know how to open this file extension, did you Google it first? Like if you tried, I'll help you. If you didn't try, I won't help you.
So can we bring the students back on? I want to ask them something.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Okay, so what is the best question you have asked during a practice?
That's a hard
Or the most interesting?
These three ask a lot of questions and I love it.
Wait, what's the best question we asked?
What's an example of a good question?
What's a question that you want to get when you're helping people even? Because all three of these guys, like I said before, I like delegate Vicente out. I delegate all three of these guys out all the time. So what's a question that you want to hear from a student? If you can't think of a good.
I guess simple, how do I do this question? Like Kate said, you don't really like just straight up tell them the answer. You want them to go and look for the answer. So like a how I do a certain thing question, like, okay, what is this? You point at that and then they're gonna be like, oh.
Or maybe
Yeah.
even like, oh, is this how you would do this question? Like, is this the, like, even if they're asking like, oh, is this the right approach? And
There is no right approach.
no, I know,
Yeah.
but like if they like,
if they've tried something.
yeah, and if they think they're on a right path, even though if it's maybe not how you did it, as long as you're like.
So maybe if they just need like reassurance and,
Yeah.
and affirmations.
I think that would be it.
So let's say a hypothetical cryptography question.
Okay.
If someone is trying to solve a cryptography puzzle, what's an example of a good question? What's an example of a bad question?
What do you think? Do you guys? I know.
A bad question is like, oh, cryptocurrency? Is that what this is?
I just ranted about this on Twitter.
I think that would be a bad question for me.
I guess a bad question would be, how do I do this? Or like, what do you want me to do? Tell me how to do it. Because
Tell me how to do it. That's-
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
that's
especially
definitely the
like,
worst.
or like, I give up. I don't really know how to do this. Like, tell me what's the right answer.
exactly.
With the crypto questions, I tend to point them to my blog. And if it's not on there, I'll help you more. But if it's on my blog and you haven't tried all of the, because I wrote one blog, it's one article you have to read to be really good at most of the cryptography at NCL. If you haven't exhausted those resources, that's a bad question.
So it's, what have you done so far to try and solve that is just as important as where you're stuck? Knowing what you've done is really important.
Yeah, pretty much, you know, as soon as you ask a question, we're all going to be like, well, what have you tried so far? You know, if you say nothing, you're probably asking a bad question.
Yeah.
Stephen, any thoughts?
I would say that one of the things that you could do is we keep a record. We ask the students to keep a log of what they've done and what they've done well. So, and then also the areas that they haven't done so well, and then they can follow up if they have questions. First of all, they like they all mentioned, but on the crypto stuff, we've actually gone to that blog. I've started sending students to your blog, Kate, so you'll be able to be seeing more activity that way. But also working with each other, not during the team competition or the individual competition, I mean, but working with each other during the prep time on those areas that you have questions. And it turns out a lot of times in our sessions we have the questions that come up. So we usually would say, okay, where's an area we need to work on as a team? So as a coach, I try to that's what I'm there for, is to say, okay, what are we having problems with? Now let's go see how we're going to go approach getting better at solving those type of problems. And so and then I don't give them the answers. I try to say, okay, now have you tried these resources? Have you looked at this? And that's the way I kind of go about getting those questions. And then they come back with maybe other questions, but sometimes the other students are more critical of their questions than I am.
I try to think of questions as like a dialogue. If you ask me a question, I'm going to ask you questions until you can figure out the answer yourself. I never think of it as like a question and answer. I think of it as like a question that's going to cause more questions. It's going to cause more questions. It's going to cause more questions. Like, questions are great and amazing. And I will only answer you in questions about what you've done, or, you know, what else can we try?
Great conversation today. I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Thank you, Kate. Thank you to your students. I'm really excited about seeing your workshop and meeting them. It's going to be a fantastic time at WISIS. Stephen, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you at WISIS. And thank you all for participating in the NCL Coaches Call for today.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.